They didn't issue a warning. There were no negotiations, no ultimatums, no calls for peace. One moment, Earth's skies were calm. The next, they were on fire. The Maltari called it a cleansing. To them, humanity was a virus, spreading too fast, too far. And so, they brought the cure. The Galactic Alliance sent fleets from every sector. Warships so massive, they blocked out the sun. They struck first at the colonies, Mars, Europa, Titan, all gone within hours. Then they turned to Earth. New York, gone. Shanghai, leveled. Cape Town, cratered. Cities turned to ash. Billions turned to memory. Across every channel, the Maltari broadcasted the same message. This is not war. It is necessary correction. Humanity is a threat to galactic harmony. They believed we were chaos. Unpredictable, aggressive, dangerous. And maybe they were right. But they forgot one thing. You can't kill a species born from struggle. As the flames rose and buildings collapsed into themselves, humanity scattered, not in surrender, in survival. Aboard emergency crafts, deep-sea bunkers, underground rail hubs, people fled. They didn't cry. They didn't beg. They just vanished. Some called it extinction. Others called it mercy. But scattered in the shadows of forgotten moons, among asteroid belts and deep space debris, we endured. The Maltari celebrated. Their fleets hovered in orbit, painting the remains of Earth with smug silence. The galaxy moved on. Another thread erased. Another footnote in the history of conquest. But beneath the ruins, something remained. Something no one saw coming. A whisper. A signal. A heartbeat. Because when the fires died down, when the screams fell silent, that's when humanity got quiet. And when humans get quiet, that's when the real danger begins. They thought it was over. They thought the purge was complete. But this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. For years, the galaxy believed humanity was gone. The Maltari fleets left Earth behind like a carcass picked clean. No further patrols, no lingering eyes. Just silence. They moved on to other agendas, other threats. But deep in the asteroid fields, beyond the forgotten jump gates, and under the charred husks of Terran colonies, something stirred. The survivors weren't soldiers. Not all of them. Some were engineers, working beneath the crust of Mars when the purge began. Some were miners from Jupiter's rings, too deep in the radiation belts to be scanned. Others were children, rescued by smugglers, drifting in cryosleep for years. One by one, they began to find each other. In encrypted channels, across abandoned satellites, through static-filled beacons that pulsed like whispers in the dark. And at the center of it all was Reyes. Nobody knew his first name. No one needed to. He had been a captain once, of a failed Terran expedition that tried to warn Earth the Maltari were planning something. No one listened. And then the sky fell. Now, Reyes wasn't asking for permission. He was building something. In the broken hull of a derelict colony ship, buried inside an asteroid's core, he formed the first resistance cell. No flags, no government, just survivors and a vow. This isn't over, he told them, his voice cold, sharp like steel under pressure. They think they wiped us out. Let's make them regret not checking twice. And from there, it grew. Old warships were dragged from the void and rebuilt. Outdated drones were rewired, repurposed, reborn. Human minds, engineers, hackers, tacticians, began turning scraps into weapons. The Maltari didn't notice. They were too busy celebrating. They wrote books about the extinction, recorded speeches praising their unity. They studied Earth's remains like archaeologists, curious, arrogant, blind. Meanwhile, Reyes and his people turned every bolt, every broken satellite, every outdated piece of code into a knife. Across the galaxy, strange things began to happen. A Maltari supply station vanished. No distress call, no debris. A scout ship exploded in deep space. Internal sabotage. Encrypted Alliance transmissions began leaking onto black market networks. And censored, untraceable. And always, after each hit, a message. Simple, bold. We are not done. At first, they called it a hoax. Then a nuisance. Then an anomaly. But deep down, in the silence between stars, some of them began to feel it. The chill of a presence they thought was gone. Not ghosts. Not echoes. Humans. The same species they thought they'd buried beneath ash. Now moving through the dark like wolves among sheep. Not for diplomacy. Not for peace. For vengeance. It started on the edge of Alliance space. A refueling outpost. Nothing special. Quiet. Routine. The Maltari had posted only a skeleton crew. Why would they need more? Humanity was extinct. Until that night. No alarms. No warnings. Just silence. And then, the power cut. Lights died. Comms went dark. Every system froze, except one security feed, glitching with static. Through the flicker, a figure stepped into view. Helmet black. Armor patched together from 10 different dead worlds. A Terran flag burned into the chest plate. And behind him, shadows moved. 3 minutes later, the station was gone. From orbit, it looked like a malfunction. A gas leak. A reactor flaw. But the report said otherwise. No crew recovered. No escape pods launched. And in the center of the blast crater, carved into the deck with a fusion torch. We remember. Panic didn't come immediately. The Alliance had seen terrorist cells before. Pirates. Fanatics. Rebels. But this was different. The next strike happened on Veilta Prime, a Maltari military depot. A fleet of ships exploded in dry dock. Security feeds erased. Their internal comms played one message on loop. Extinction goes both ways. The third attack wasn't stealth. It was loud, brutal. A Terran ship, patched together from colonial wreckage and deep-core mining drills, burst out of hyperspace near an Alliance trade convoy. They didn't demand surrender. They didn't ask questions. They just opened fire. The convoy was gone in under 7 minutes. Not a single human life lost. The Maltari tried to trace the ship, but it was already gone, vanished into the void. And for the first time in a decade, they whispered a name they had erased from their records. Humans. Back in the deep zones, Reyes watched it all unfold. He didn't smile. He wasn't in this for pride or revenge. Not entirely. He was in it for the message that if you try to wipe out a species like his, you better make sure there's not even one of them left, because one is all it takes. His fleet wasn't big, but it was fast. It was hidden. And more importantly, it was human. They didn't fight like the others. They didn't follow rules. They sabotaged. They adapted. They improvised. And when needed, they burned everything. The Maltari High Command held a meeting in secret. 17 species. Over a dozen military strategists. All trying to understand one thing. How? How are they still alive? How are they hitting us this hard? How did we not see this coming? And the oldest among them said it plainly. Because we didn't study them. We exterminated them. The room fell quiet. Because they all knew what that meant. They didn't wipe out a species. They created an enemy with nothing left to lose. The first strike was more than destruction. It was more than a warning. It was a reminder that the fire they lit on Earth didn't die. It spread. It evolved. It waited. And now, it was coming for them. The Alliance tried to understand. The attacks didn't follow patterns. There were no planets claimed, no territories taken, no flags raised. Only destruction. Precise. Cold. Unrelenting. It wasn't war. It was calculated evolution. So the Maltari gathered their best minds. Biologists. Historians. Warfare theorists. They pored over human data, the scraps they had left. And the more they studied, the more uneasy they became. Earth was a death world. They had always known that. But they hadn't truly understood what it meant. Their own species evolved on temperate planets. Lush, calm, safe. But humans? Earth was chaos. Gravity heavier than standard. Oceans filled with apex predators. Storm systems that ripped cities apart. Tectonic plates that shattered continents. A sun that baked the surface and froze it months later. And through all of that, humans thrived. Not because of what they were born with, but because of what they became. Where others evolved for comfort, humans evolved for crisis. Every generation of war, disease, collapse, it didn't break them. It sharpened them, turned their pain into memory, memory into instinct, instinct into strategy. They are not the strongest species, a Maltari scientist said, pacing before a council. Not the fastest, not the smartest, but they are the most stubborn. She paused, then whispered the word that silenced the room. They adapt. Faster than any species they'd seen. They didn't need decades. Sometimes, they needed minutes. In their ancient wars, soldiers built weapons out of scrap mid-battle. Pilots rerouted damaged ships using chewing gum and adrenaline. Civilians became soldiers overnight. And somehow it worked. Now the Alliance was seeing it again, on a galactic scale. A Terran ship scavenged from wreckage. Was faster than a Maltari patrol cruiser. A stolen plasma coil from a destroyed station. Repurposed into a portable railgun. Human encryption cracked an alien defense grid. Not in weeks. In hours. Every time the Maltari responded, Humans evolved around it. Back in deep space, Reyes stood inside the war room. Not a holographic table, just an old steel board scratched with maps and magnetic tokens. Around him stood engineers who had never seen Earth, teenagers born in cryosleep, soldiers with makeshift limbs. They weren't the best fleet in the galaxy, but they had no limits. And Reyes knew that was the one thing no empire could stop. "We don't need perfect ships," he told them. "We just need to make them bleed. And we're very, very good at that." Elsewhere, Maltari broadcasts shifted tone. No longer did they mock the Terran ghosts. Now they called them ferals, dark seeds, adaptive threats. But none of those labels mattered, because every time a fleet regrouped, it disappeared. Every time a leader made a speech, they choked on air that had been poisoned the night before. Every time they thought the pattern was predictable, it changed. And in the council halls of a once proud empire, they began to whisper a word they once erased from their records. Humans, not as a species, not as an enemy, but as a force, a problem that learns, a wound that won't close, a fire that doesn't stop. This wasn't survival anymore. This was adaptation turned into strategy, pain turned into process, and extinction turned into a promise. They wanted to end humanity, but now they had something much worse. They had created humans with nothing left to lose, and no reason to stop. The attacks stopped being whispers. No more quiet sabotage. No more anonymous hacks. No more shadows. Humanity came out of the dark like a wave of knives. And this time, they didn't run. They hunted. It started with Operation Backlash, a coordinated strike across 6 systems. Simultaneous. Perfectly timed. Maltari communications jammed. Defense grids hijacked. Command centers obliterated before alarms even finished sounding. In the heart of the Gamma Belt, an entire fuel convoy vanished mid-jump. On Zephyra 9, a high-ranking Alliance admiral was found chained to the ruins of his own fortress, surrounded by the message, "We warned you." And on the mining planet Archiles Prime, the skies fell. Hundreds of repurposed Terran drones rained down from orbit, each carrying nothing but scrap bombs, duct-taped engines, and rage. The colony burned before they even understood what was happening. The Maltari panicked. Meetings were called. Fleets redeployed. Systems locked down. But it didn't matter. Because the humans weren't after territory. They weren't after resources. They were after the system itself. They hit communication relays, fuel reserves, supply depots. Not to hold them, just to burn them down. They didn't want to rule. They wanted the enemy to collapse under its own weight. And the worst part? No one knew where they were coming from. Reyes's fleet changed its jump codes every 3 hours. Bases were hidden in asteroid belts, nebulae, dead colonies, even ancient wrecks. Every time a ship was spotted, it was already too late. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were myths with teeth, the kind of stories new cadets whispered about in bunk beds. If you see a ship with a Terran sigil, don't shoot. Run. But the most terrifying thing wasn't the tactics. It was the unity. The Maltari had expected chaos, revenge, emotion. What they got was discipline, coordination, intelligence. The resistance wasn't random. It was strategic, patterned, efficient, ruthless. Entire sectors were mapped, weakened, destabilized, before the first strike even came. In one of the intercepted broadcasts, a Maltari general could be heard screaming, "They're ghosts. They're everywhere and nowhere. How are they doing this?" A human voice replied, quiet and calm, "You taught us how to die. Now we're teaching you how to lose." In a single month, 17 supply lines fell. 4 major shipyards were destroyed. 12 admirals went missing. The Alliance tried to keep it quiet, but you can't silence fear. Smaller races began to leave the coalition. Some sent anonymous supplies to Reyes's network. Others just vanished, not wanting to be caught between the coming storm. And still, the humans pushed forward. Back on his command ship, Reyes stood in silence as the war map updated. Red icons turned to black. Maltari strongholds, gone. Communication hubs, dark. Patrol fleets, erased. He didn't smile. Not yet. This wasn't victory. This was the prelude. He turned to his crew. Next phase begins now. No mercy. No second chances. We didn't ask for this war, but we're going to finish it. And as the engines roared and the stars shifted, one thing was certain. The galaxy was no longer wondering if humans were alive. Now, they were wondering, how many of them would be left when this was over? The Maltari homeworld had never known silence. It was the center of power, of conquest, of control. The skyline always buzzed with ships. The streets lit with banners of victory. The air thick with pride. But now, it was quiet. No ships in orbit. No fleets returning home. Just long-range distress calls and static. Inside a heavily fortified bunker, the last of the high command gathered. Admirals, scientists, diplomats. The architects of the purge. Pale. Broken. Listening to news they could no longer spin. Dozens of colonies, lost. Hundreds of warships, gone. Entire sectors, dark. And somewhere out there, the humans were still coming. They made one last attempt. A signal. Desperate. To the Terran resistance, we propose a ceasefire. A summit. A path to peace. They even included coordinates. A neutral moon. No weapons. No guards. Just leaders. And a plea. We acknowledge our mistakes. We see now that extinction was too far. We seek resolution. Reyes got the message. He read it once. Then again. And for the first time in weeks. He laughed. But it wasn't joy. It was the kind of laugh that comes from something broken. Something sharp. They want peace. He stood up slowly. His officers turned to him, waiting. They don't want peace. They want survival. Still, he answered. He went to the meeting. Alone. No weapons. No guards. Just a worn black jacket with a faded Terran emblem. And a history the galaxy would never forget. The alien leaders sat waiting. Nervous. Sweating. They rose when Reyes entered. He didn't sit. He didn't speak. He just looked at them. And in that silence, they remembered. They remembered what they had done. To his world. To his people. To the children who didn't make it. To the cities that no longer had names. The Maltari diplomat cleared his throat. Commander Reyes, we deeply regret. Don't. Reyes's voice cut through the room like a blade. You don't regret anything. You regret losing. The council fidgeted. No one met his eyes. You burned our skies, he said. You called us vermin. You broadcasted our extinction like a festival. He stepped forward, close enough to hear them breathing. And now, you want forgiveness. They stayed silent. Let me tell you what forgiveness sounds like. He tapped a button on his wrist. Somewhere far above, in orbit, a fleet shifted position. Terran ships, rebuilt from wreckage, armed with stolen alien tech. Every railgun charged. Every missile primed. Reyes stared at them. You wanted extinction? Now you'll see what it feels like to beg for your own lives. The council dropped to their knees. One of them whispered, Please, mercy. Reyes leaned in close. Mercy died with Earth. Outside the bunker, the Terran fleet descended. Not as conquerors. Not as diplomats. As reminders that some fires, once lit, do not go out. They consume. Above the shattered moons of Carnus Theta, the last of the Maltari military gathered. What remained of their once unmatched armada now floated like a bruised and bleeding shield, surrounding their central command station, Citadel Vornak. Inside, commanders screamed into fractured comms. Orders were jumbled, fleets disorganized. No backup. No escape routes. Only one directive remained. Survive. But survival was off the table now. Reyes stood at the helm of the UHS Revenant, humanity's flagship, rebuilt from the bones of Terran warships and enhanced with stolen Maltari tech. Around him, the new Terran fleet stretched across the void. Not large, not pretty, but deadly. Their ships weren't designed to intimidate. They were built to end wars. And this was the last one. Target every ship within the shield net, Reyes ordered. No more warnings. No more messages. Across the fleet, officers nodded. They weren't rookies. They were survivors, some born in exile, others raised on broken worlds. Every one of them had lost something. And today, they were here to take everything back. The first volley lit the stars. Railguns fired from 5 light seconds away, tearing through enemy cruisers before alarms could even activate. Missiles struck in coordinated waves, a symphony of destruction. Drones buzzed into the field, weaving between Maltari ships and detonating on impact. And then, the final piece came online. Aboard the Revenant, engineers whispered nervously as the lights dimmed. Project Obsidian, Earth's last weapon, built in secret, powered by hybrid cores, and never tested until now. A massive cannon beneath the Revenant's spine came to life. One blast, one shot. It didn't explode. It unmade. The beam tore through space itself, ripping through the Citadel's core shield like silk and punching through 3 capital ships in a row. They didn't burn. They just ceased to exist. Inside Citadel Vornak, command systems crashed. Officers screamed. Escape pods failed. The AI defense network went blind. And in that final moment, The Maltari leaders looked to the stars and saw only one thing: Earth's wrath, written in fire and silence. Within 10 minutes, the battle was over. No enemy ships remained. No escape vessels made it past the blockade. It wasn't a fight. It was a reckoning. Reyes stood in silence as the debris field expanded across the Starline. Status: Maltari command destroyed. Citadel offline. No signals left. He nodded. Broadcast this. The Terran transmission echoed across the galaxy. To any who watched us burn and did nothing, we saw you. To those who joined the purge, we remember you. And to those still hiding behind treaties and borders, know this. We don't want your land. We don't want your alliances. We don't want your peace. We just want you to understand. This is what happens when you try to erase a death world species. No one responded. No one dared. Because as Reyes turned away from the screen, and the last embers of the Maltari Empire drifted into the void, the galaxy knew. This wasn't humanity's return. This was humanity unleashed. The ashes of the Maltari Empire drifted through space like a funeral veil. Empty ships, silent channels, broken worlds. What was once the most feared military alliance in the galaxy had become a memory, burned into stardust by the very species they tried to erase. No monument would be built. No songs would be sung, because no one wanted to remember the price of underestimating Earth. In the political centers of neutral systems, governments scrambled to rewrite alliances. Planets that once turned their backs on humanity now lit candles in Terran honor. Some out of guilt, most out of fear, because now everyone understood. Humanity had survived extinction, not just physically, but mentally, strategically, ruthlessly. They didn't come back for justice. They came back as a storm. And the storm had a name now. On the bridge of the UHS Revenant, Reyes stood with his crew. No cheering, no celebration, just silence, just peace. The kind that only comes after you bury your enemies yourself. An officer turned to him. Incoming transmissions, sir. 33 in the last hour. Full galactic spectrum. Reyes didn't flinch. What do they want? Some offer peace. Others want alliances. A few surrender without condition. He nodded slowly. Tell them we're listening, but not forgiving. Back on Earth, rebuilt from scorched soil and shattered steel. A new dawn rose. Skylines rose again. Families returned to the stars. Flags flew, not with pride, but with a quiet warning that Earth was no longer just a world. It was a lesson. Across the galaxy, children were told bedtime stories about the humans. But they weren't monsters. They weren't heroes. They were a reminder that no matter how strong your fleet, no matter how loud your empire roars, there is always a species out there born from fire. And if you push it too far, you will not hear them plead. You will hear them hunt. A final message echoed through the galactic net. Simple. Undeniable. We do not seek war. But if you bring it to us, we will become the thing you fear most. We are not survivors. We are the storm.